This is a good day, guys. Our guest today is a true practitioner, guys, and he became a health coach with his goal to help others build their own sustainable lifestyle through a holistic ketogenic approach. With his highest recorded weight at 540 pounds and losing 300 pounds not just once but twice, has given him the wealth of knowledge that he now shares with his clients. He is also the host of the Fat Guy Forum podcast, and I'm so honored to be joined by Mike, also known as Gormy Goes Keto. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I'm glad to be here. Glad to talk today.
Man, lost 300 pounds twice. What a journey,
Mm-hmm.
huh, Gormy? What a
Mm-hmm.
journey, sir. It's incredible where life can lead us to learn and grow and experience everything and be able to share that knowledge to people so they too can live a sustainable lifestyle. Man, wow, thank you for coming on. What you were able to accomplish is so crazy to me. So let's preface this to our listeners, Coach, so they understand. So back in 2008, your highest weight was 540. Then in
Mm-hmm.
2010, went on your first weight loss journey, and by 2013, you were down 210, right?
I was down to 210 pounds, so I'd lost 330 pounds.
But then in the same year, in under 6 months, you've gained
Mm-hmm.
about 270. So from 210 to 240 pounds, 480 pounds, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So 210 pounds to 480. And then,
Oh yeah.
and of course, um, everything, present moment, lost all of that through keto. And
Mm-hmm.
you're here today to tell that story. I want to pick your brain on how you were able to do this. Um, this is a lot to take in. Maybe our listeners is wondering right now, man, how did he do it?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into your relationship with food.
Sure.
You talked about always being big, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was your
Oh yeah.
prior relationship with food before keto, before all of this, leading to the first time you've lost the first 300?
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of people, I grew up as a bigger kid. My family,
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the best eating habits, but I developed my own set of habits and relationships, during that time where food just became the center of my life. Like it
Mm,
was fun, it was excitement, it was a friend.
mm,
I'm a little bit older than a lot of people you see sometimes in the social media space. I'm 48 years old. So when I was growing up, unlike right now, there weren't a lot of fat kids in school. There weren't a lot of bigger kids in your school. So
mm,
there was usually one or two in the entire school, who had a significant weight problem. And so I was one of those kids. So often then you're the target of bullying and ridicule,
mm,
and it creates kind of this insulation around you in terms of how you relate to people. And for me, I developed this relationship where I related better to food than I did to individuals. And it just through all phases of my life was the center focus. And I would have points where either my through my family's concern or through just social concern, I would decide it was time to try to lose weight. So I would try diets, and I tried I did Weight Watchers many times. I was, telling again, this is telling of my age, but I was a big Richard Simmons Deal a Meal fan, sweating to the oldies for a while
mm,
there. I tried, I would find random books on low carb diets. I remember the Carb Addicts diet was one that I did several times because that diet, it was low carb meals for breakfast and lunch, and then
mm,
dinner was what they called their reward meal, where you could basically eat anything.
mm,
And I kind of glommed onto that. I,
mm,
you know, I often found ways to fit Ben and Jerry's or Reese's peanut butter cups or things into that reward meal, which was a timed meal,
mm,
and had success. I had several times where I would lose 50, 75, 100 pounds and put it right back on because I was always focused exclusively on the scale. I was always focused exclusively on
mm,
just doing what I needed to do to get to that finish line. Like most people, I saw weight loss as a journey that has a beginning and an end. And so even when I reached my heaviest weight, and it was the 2008, 2009, in that range of time when I was in the I had been over 500 pounds probably for 5 or 6 years,
mm,
well over 450 pounds probably for over a decade at that point.
mm,
And I was just reaching a point where I could barely stand, could barely move. I had made a move physically across country that didn't work out, and moved back home and wasn't finding work because no one wanted to hire me because I physically just wasn't really existing in the world. Like if I went to go for a job interview, by the time I got into the office that I was interviewing in,
Mm.
I was covered in sweat and breathing heavy and not really, looking more like I needed medical help than I needed a job. And so I made a decision that if I wanted to pay my rent, I was going to need to work. So to work, I needed to lose weight. So at that point, I found the paleo diet, and I thought that was it, I thought that was my key to success. I
Mm.
thought that was going to be the thing that was going to help me. I learned so much doing it, though. I will say I learned a lot about nutrient quality and ingredients
Mm.
and reading labels and all of those things that you need to learn, I think, for a successful weight loss journey or for to be healthy in
Mm.
general. But I did no work on the mindset side of things. I
Mm.
paid no attention to who I was as a person, who I was becoming as a person. And I like to say that, I reached that weight loss goal, and I had no idea how to live life, in a new
Mm.
body at a new weight. Like I really lost a sense of, because I had defined my identity as being the big guy, and being
Mm.
food was everything to me. And I took that away, but had done zero work to kind of figure out what might take that place. So it was very easy for me to fall back into my food addiction and my behaviors and my habits and those old patterns and comforts, and basically retreated, like you said, very quickly. Within 6 months, I was up 270 pounds. The only reason I don't think I got back to my heaviest weight was because by that point I had really beat up my body. I was really
Mm.
starting to see signs of type 2 diabetes developing very clearly, and I was terrified of that. I didn't want to see a
Mm.
doctor. I didn't want to get diagnosed. I knew what that would mean, and I was scared of it.
Mm.
So I would, at times, eat low carb for a little bit because I knew that would make the symptoms go away that I was clearly seeing.
Mm.
And had really just decided I was going to live. I had tried so many times to lose weight, and I apologize if this isn't coming out clear enough, but I reached a point where I gave up. I reached a point where I decided, you can't change. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about this. Eating makes you
Mm.
happy. So just keep doing it. Just allow it to keep happening, and you'll die. I'd
Mm.
accepted that I was probably going to die soon. I had actually written a letter to my family that I kept by my bed when I went to sleep at night, in
Wow.
case I didn't wake up, because I was pretty sure there was going to be a
Mm.
day coming that I wouldn't wake up. And in that pit of darkness I was living in, eventually, through just some family experiences with some big changes that happened in my family, I had this one thought, and that thought was that my life wasn't just about me, that my life
Mm.
was about a bigger picture. It was about responsibility to community and to the people that
Mm.
raised me.
Yeah.
And so I needed to fight if I
Mm.
wanted to be there for
Yeah.
them. And it was the first time in my life that the thought entered my head that I wanted to be alive.
Mm.
And I think that's hard for some people to hear, because they think, well, doesn't every person wake up every day and want to be alive?
Mm.
And it wasn't that I woke up every day and was like, if I die, I die.
Mm.
I didn't chase death, but I I didn't care one way or the other. Like
Mm.
I cared more about filling that
Mm.
hole inside of
Yeah.
me with food than I cared about what my life meant or where it would go. And when I finally realized that I did want to live, because I felt this sense of greater responsibility and
Mm.
greater calling within me, um, I realized that I was going to have to fight for it, and that I was going to have to find a way to make some real lasting change and do it differently and approach it differently. Not just with changing the way that I ate, but also changing my
Your
mindset, about
mindset.
working on where my head was at, like being conscious of how every change I was making was going to impact me. How was I feeling? How was food making me feel? How was not having food
Mm.
making me feel? Like, why all those emotions that I avoided before, facing them head
Mm.
on, I think was going to be a big part of that process. And now through all of this, like I had said, paleo was a big part of my life. And I think when you're someone that's a I'm trying to think the best habitual dieter, I guess is the best way to put it. You stay
Mm.
up on diet lingo. You stay up on what the big trends are. And I was starting to see the keto word pop up a
Mm.
lot. So this was back in, I would probably say, the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And I was like, okay, I know low carb has done it for me before. I know focusing on cleaner food helps. Um, Let me dig into this keto thing. And so I read the book Keto Clarity by Jimmy Moore,
Mm.
and I read the book Fitness Confidential by Vinnie Tortorich. And I was like, okay. And I'm an all or nothing person in a lot of ways. Like I'm either all in or I'm all out. Like I have to flip that switch and decide I'm going to do something. So I read those books over a weekend,
Mm.
and by Sunday night decided, okay,
Yeah.
tomorrow I start keto. So it was like 10 or 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, and I basically ravaged my house. Like I went into every cupboard, the refrigerator, every hiding place I had in my apartment,
Mm.
and found all the food that I knew I wasn't going to be able to keep around and be able to, control if I kept it around, and bagged it all up. And some of it was unopened, so I left it
Mm.
like kind of in the mail room of my apartment building, and with a note that was
Man.
like, take it, for people. The rest I literally probably threw away like 3 garbage bags worth of food,
Yeah.
and was like, okay, tomorrow we start this. And that was middle of February of 2017. And from there, I, and again, like a lot of
Mm.
people, I realized I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know exactly what I needed to do, but let me just
You just
start.
wanted,
Like I
you
think,
just know that it's gonna work.
yeah, or I knew that I needed to do
Mm.
something. And I knew also, like I had it in my head very much at that point that this was the time I had to do it. Like there's no more wavering back and forth. There's no more losing and putting it all back on, because
Mm.
my body would not survive that. So I had to go kind of all in. So I started in that lazy, dirty keto space that a lot of people do,
Mm.
where I basically was just tracking net carbs. And because I had been paleo for so long, I knew kind of how to put together a plate that was balanced with protein
Mm.
and fat. And so I had protein and fat to satiation. I was tracking net
Mm.
carbs. That was about, and I wasn't even really using a food tracker. It was more
Mm.
like in my head, I'd be like, okay, this is how many carbs are in this. I ate that already today. Let me move on to the next
Mm.
thing. And like a lot of people
Mm.
experience, especially when you're almost 500 pounds, the weight comes off pretty fast.
Mm.
The weight drops pretty fast. And something that happened along the way for me, though, there was a couple things that happened that first year that I think are important for me to point out to people, because I think sometimes, especially in the curated social media space, we see things as perfect for everyone. We see everything as like, it looks like people just have had this perfect straight road. Like I started keto and everything was great and I lost weight and I got immediately to my, it may have taken a couple of years, but I got to my goal. And it wasn't perfect. Like I was trying to be as mindful as I could. And I hit a point in the summer of that year where something I think some people might be able to relate to if they've lost a significant amount of weight. When you're that heavy, when you lose that first 100 pounds or so, you start to feel a lot better. You're not waking up in pain every day. You're not having as much trouble breathing. You're not
Mm.
feeling those. I wasn't having those same symptoms of type 2 diabetes. I wasn't urinating constantly. I wasn't sweating as I ate. I wasn't getting the, cold sweats and all of that all the time. Like I was feeling better. So I then went off track, and I went off track for a month.
Mm.
Um, and it's not a pretty month. I put 40 pounds back on in a month. But the interesting thing for me was I tried to stay mindful during that time, even. And I
Mm.
started to realize that as much as I was enjoying the eating again, I didn't feel good.
What was the
I started to
difference
feel
from
bad again.
falling off the first time
Yeah.
to falling off this time? What was
Yeah,
something stopped you from going into this whole
right.
cycle?
Yeah. I had realized that I was now paying attention to how my body felt when I ate.
Mm.
I was realizing that I was starting to isolate myself socially again. I was starting to go to these places that I didn't enjoy. Like because I was not because I think in the past what I would always do is put the blinders on
Mm.
and just stay focused on I enjoy, the food is what I enjoy. I'm fulfilling every craving, and that's all that I need to worry about. But here I was like, okay, I'm fulfilling every craving, but it's getting harder when I go
Mm.
out to meet friends again.
Mm.
I'm starting to choose food over people. I'm waking up in the morning with aches and pains. One of the things that I really learned is when you clean up the food that you're eating, you reduce that systemic inflammation.
Mm.
And for me, that manifests as joint pain and back pain and really just like overall general pain. And it was coming back rapidly. So I got back on track.
Mm.
First time ever in my life after just a few weeks off a diet plan, I got back to that way of eating. And
Mm.
to me, that was amazing because I had literally never done that. I'm over at this point, over 40 years old, had never done that. And so I was like focused and laser focused and ready to go. And so now we're heading into the fall of 2017. And then we hit the winter and I got pneumonia, and I
Mm.
got severe pneumonia. And I was hospitalized for 21 days. I almost died. When I got to the hospital,
Wow.
the doctors told me that if I had waited a few more hours, I wouldn't have lived. I was on this jet of oxygen trying to pump air into my lungs
Mm.
that just couldn't accept it. It was a pretty horrific
Mm.
period for myself. But I stayed keto in the hospital, which was a challenge,
Mm.
especially when they bring you the diabetic meal and it has over 100 grams of carbs in the meal.
My
The
goodness.
diabetic breakfast had oatmeal and a blueberry muffin and orange juice. And I was
Mm.
like, no, I wanted the diabetic meal. I thought that was low carb. And they're like, oh, no, this is the low carb meal.
Mm.
And I'm like, I need to talk to someone in your dietary program
Man.
because no, 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 no. I need something different. So I basically, in the hospital, I lived on omelets in the morning and then green salad with very bland chicken breast on top of it, with butter packets that I hoarded. I would tell them to bring me butter packets with my breakfast, and I would hoard them in the table by my hospital bed because I was immobile. I couldn't get
Mm.
out of bed. And the reason I bring up that story isn't just to scare people and say, you can end up in the hospital or anything along those lines, but because I realized when I was in the hospital that I had made the right decision to fight for my
Mm.
life. That I was facing, because for me, another big part of this was I hadn't seen a doctor in 25 years. I was terrified of doctors. And here I was having to let them poke, prod, do whatever they wanted to do to me to keep me alive. I learned when I was in the hospital at some point in my
Mm.
past, I had a heart attack and didn't know it. Um, and so that was going to be another kind of phase of my journey going forward, seeing a cardiologist
Mm.
and dealing with all of that. But I came out of that starting 28, I came into 2018 living at my parents' house for 2 months because I couldn't get up the stairs in my apartment. I just didn't have the strength anymore. I was back. I wasn't just back at ground zero when it came to physically how my body could move and the activity I could do. I was well worse than I was, when I started. Um, but I knew that I wanted to fight, and I knew that I was in it to fight. So
Mm.
I kept going. It was kind of incredible to have a doctor tell me that if I had been where I had been in February of that year when I got the pneumonia, I wouldn't have lived.
Mm.
Um, and not just have one doctor tell you that, to have every doctor that sees you tell you, keep doing what you're doing. We may not understand keto completely ourselves, but it's clearly doing something good for you. So keep doing this. And it reinforced a lot of things and kind of rocketed me into the next phase of my journey, which was being conscious of the fact that eventually my weight loss slowed. I hit some plateaus. I was starting, this is something a lot of people in the keto space don't like to hear. I was overeating on keto food. I was overeating on carnivore food. I was keeping my carbs incredibly low and still seeing my weight stall, and
Mm.
actually started to put some weight back on because my food addiction and my desire to eat is stronger than the satiation I got from those
Mm.
foods. So I realized I needed help, and I needed to try to figure, I realized for the first time I was going to probably have to start counting macros, which was terrifying to me. Like, what did that even mean? How do you put those together? How do you figure that out? What are these ratios? And so I ended up hiring a coach, and he was someone I was friendly with on
Mm.
Instagram, and he was starting to do coaching. And so he was like, you'd be my first client. Are you interested? And I loved the idea of being someone's first client because there was a part of me that was like, okay, he's not going to know how to handle all of my tricks. I can get as much out of him as he gets out of me in this experience. I think I thought I could outsmart him. I couldn't, but I thought I could because, I think we all think that sometimes. And I started working with a coach and dialed things in. And what I learned eventually was that the diet I had been eating, while it was keto, I was eating more of a high protein, lower carb,
Mm.
lower fat keto. Like,
Mm.
not low fat, but my fat ratio wasn't that high. And when we actually brought my fat percentage up, I actually started to feel some physical relief from some of the symptoms of the food addiction that I struggled with for years.
Mm.
I started to understand what it meant to be satiated. So that freed me up to actually start working on the real hard mindset side of things, like
Mm.
really diving into, why was I turning to food? Like, what was it doing for me? Where was it bringing me? And it was almost like this perfect storm of good things happened.
Mm.
All these pieces started falling into place. And helped me kind of come through to get to the point where I wanted to get with my weight and my body, but also to realize throughout all of that that this is a lifelong journey and there were things I was going to need to keep working on. I was terrified of the idea of maintenance because I had never done
Mm-hmm.
it successfully before on my own. So that was another reason why I hired a coach, was so I could have someone help me understand what building a life in maintenance looks like when it comes to your relationship with food. And all of that kind of brought me through to where I ended up. And along the
Mm.
way, that coach eventually became my boss when he decided to start his own coaching company, to leave the company he was working for. And he was like, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at doing this. Are you interested in becoming a coach?" And then throw in the global pandemic started, and I lost my careers that I have been building for
Mm.
years. And so we sat down and said, "Okay, what would it take for me to start doing this?" And started working on it. And so that was, it was July of 2020 that
Mm.
I took on my first clients. And so now it's been a little over a year that I've been working with people and kind of living my life. I've moved from the East Coast to the West
Mm.
Coast and made some big changes through all of this. And it's been an exciting journey to be on, but it's been pretty wonderful to learn these different lessons
Man.
about myself along the way, and like really see how you can put things into practice and make it a
Mm.
part of your life, and understand, like, a lot of people, see keto as this thing that they just do temporarily to get to a weight loss goal, and then they go back to being quote
Yes.
unquote normal. Whereas for me, I really learned that this is how I thrive, and this is the place where my body thrives, and it's more than sustainable.
Mm.
It's something that I crave.
Mm.
So
Wow.
it's been a bit of a roller coaster.
Wow. Man, when did you have this awareness? Because as you talked about, you know, um, getting into your second time trying to lose weight, you've talked about mindset that you didn't have the first time, the first go around. Mindset is always number one. You gotta have the right reason why. You talked about having the right reasons. You talked about in the first weight loss journey, you were so worried about the scale that that became your fall the first time. Um, man, there's a lot of things here that I want to talk to you about. When did you accepted that you had a problem? When did you know that you have an addiction? Because that's hard to accept in the beginning. So when did you accept that? Because I think for every healing to heal is you have to be able to accept that there is a problem, right? And did you have that the first time? Did you know you had a problem the first time that you went on a journey? Or was it that because you have this burning desire the second time that you didn't have the first time, right? So, what can you take from the first time that you were able to take or learn so that you think that helped you on the
Hmm.
second journey?
Well, I think I always had an awareness
Mm,
that I clearly, had something going on with food that
mm,
wasn't normal, in terms of that relationship. And I think a lot of people are afraid of the word addiction
mm,
because they think somehow by identifying that they have an addiction, that abdicates responsibility.
mm,
That, I talk to a lot of people who are like, well, I don't want to say that I have a food addiction because then I I have no control. And I'm like, well, that's not what it's
mm,
about. It's about identifying patterns of behavior, and what are those patterns of behavior that need to change, and what do you need to do to change them. And I think the biggest takeaway from me from my first journey to my second journey was that I hadn't really uncovered my why. Like it's cliche to use why with a capital W, I think, at this point in the health space, but I think it's really important. Like, that first time around, my why was lose enough weight to get a job, become employable again. And that's great. Like, honestly, like, that makes sense because that plays off into so many other things, but that's not the real why. That's not what that was about. Because if I had really dug into it, that was the why was more about the fact that I wasn't accessing, I was losing access to the world.
mm,
I was losing access to community and society and being able to do things that people take for granted every day. But I didn't dig into that. I was afraid to dig
mm,
into that, I think, because that also, I honestly think I didn't dig too far into it because when I did it that time, I wasn't convinced that I was going to change forever,
mm,
and I knew that if I did too much work on figuring out why I was doing the things that I was doing, that I might actually change
Mm.
forever. And I wasn't willing to give up, I wasn't willing to give up that behavior at that point. And so I think that's one of the bigger differences this time, is that I very clearly determined in the beginning what my why was.
Mm.
And at that point in February of 2017, my why was that I wanted to live. It came down to a base human instinct to wanting to live. And I actually wrote that on pieces of paper and hung it up around my
Mm.
apartment,
Yeah.
on the refrigerator, on the food cabinets, in the bathroom, on the mirror, because I needed to remind myself every day, when I woke up and didn't feel like going to the gym, when I woke up and didn't feel like prepping food, when I woke up and just didn't feel like participating in anything,
Mm.
that I was doing it for a reason that was really important. And I think sometimes when you talk to people, their why initially is very surface level. I want to fit in a bathing suit. I want to look good at a wedding, but really that's not what that's about, and you have to be able to go to yourself. And I saw this, there's an activity that I eventually discovered, and it's called the 5 whys. And
Mm.
it's, you ask yourself why you're doing something, and then you say, but why? And you answer it. And then again, you say, but why? And you do that 5 times to try to dig
Mm.
deeper into your
Yeah.
purpose. And for me, it really had to start becoming about, what was my purpose for making change?
Mm.
What was it really about? And I then had to realize that that why can evolve and change over time, because eventually you hit a point where you're going to live. I hit a point where I was going to survive. Especially all the medical stuff I went through, I had rubber stamps from a lot of doctors saying, you're going to live, you're surviving, you're not dying.
Mm.
And so I couldn't use the I'm going to die as an excuse anymore, to drive me. I had to start thinking about what that meant. So that's when, for me, my why went from I want to live to I want to thrive.
Mm.
And I had to define what thriving in life meant for me. Like, what did that look like? Did it mean just sitting back and letting the world pass me by? Did it mean not taking opportunities when it came to work and business and all of those things? Like, well, how does that permeate deeper into my life? Because I think often one of the things, when you are on a weight loss journey, especially one that is long and involves a significant amount of weight, you get so fixated on the scale because it's important.
Mm.
I don't think, like, I honestly don't like when people say, don't weigh yourself, don't check on that. When you're 500 pounds, the scale matters. Seeing that scale move
Mm.
matters. Like, it's not just about how do I feel today? It's, am I losing weight that's putting pressure on my organs,
Mm.
on my knees? Like, am I making this change? But eventually, when the scale becomes less important, you have to figure out what is important. You have to figure out what are the goals you're still working on. And I think for someone who has lost a significant amount of weight to have a sustainable
Mm.
journey, they still need to keep clearly defined goals and purpose, in focus. They need to know what they're working towards. Even if that means shifting it to a different area of life, it means still knowing your purpose every day that you get up.
Mm.
And I think every human being could benefit from defining their why,
Mm.
what their purpose in life is, and we all don't always know the exact answers.
Mm.
Like, I still don't know why I'm here on this planet. That's
Mm.
not what I'm talking
Mm.
about. But I'm talking about what gets me up out of bed every day. Why do I eat the way that I eat? Why do I move my body the way that I move? Why do I treat myself the way that I treat myself now? And having a clear understanding of that, because when things get hard, and it will get hard, that's the thing that I also think a lot of people don't talk about, is it there's going to be really crappy days, there's going to be crappy weeks, there's going to be moments where you want to quit. And if you have that why clearly in focus, and I've worked with people who their why is wanting to
Mm.
be an active, engaging parent in their children's lives.
Mm.
So when they have a day when all they want to do is hit a drive through and fill their face with junk food, I tell them, okay, how is that serving you? How is that helping you become a more active participant in your child's life? And if it's not, are you going to continue to do it? Like, when you have that thing that cuts to the core of your being in front of you, it's hard to lie to it.
Mm.
We're great at telling ourselves stories. I was great at convincing myself of anything I wanted to.
Mm.
I feel like in a lot of ways, people that struggle with food addiction or any addiction, we would be great lawyers because we can make very convincing arguments. We can convince ourselves to do almost anything. And when you're starkly honest with yourself, it gets harder to tell those lies.
Mm.
When it's not just about, this is going to make me feel better, but I'm just choosing this over other things in my life that are important. When you lay that all out, it gets harder to make those choices. And that's one of the big lessons that I learned, from my first massive journey to this one, is I have to be starkly honest with myself about everything that I'm doing and keep that sense of purpose in mind.
Mm. Wow. I love how you're practicing as a coach now, because this wealth of experience that you have under your belt now, failing a few times. You talked about being scared to try again because you've failed so many times. And now that you've gotten over that hump, and now you're helping people um, with, you know, basically telling your own story. Um, for me, that only comes from either learning from your own mistakes through trial and error, or learning from people who has failed and succeeded. You on your podcast, you talk about the journeys of other people and how they succeeded, right? You know, they say, smart people learn from people's mistake. But that is it reality that really, do you get people that would come to you that just want to lose weight, and what's their mindset going into it? Is it reality that people can, in your experience, you had to learn from your mistakes. You know that what you're doing is detrimental to your body, and it's pushing your body to the limit. Gaining 270 in 6 months. Um, why is it that you think that we have to go through it to be able to learn things from ourselves? And what should what should one's mindset be going into a weight loss journey like you did?
Sure. So first, I think people come at weight loss from all different places.
Mm,
I've worked with clients who it's it is about they're on similar journeys to mine, that they struggle with food addiction, or they struggle with a poor relationship with food, or an emotional relationship with food. But I've also worked with people that just don't understand how food works.
mm,
They've never I've worked with clients who are close to me in age, who are significantly overweight, who have never attempted to diet
mm,
in their lives. Like, they've never learned how to read a food label. They've never learned what fat, protein, and carbs means. They've never learned what vitamins are, like all of those things. So like there are people where it is about the technical knowledge. It is just about helping a person understand
mhm,
what different foods do to the body, how it makes you feel. And then with them, when they start to eat, make healthier choices when it comes to food, and they see these changes, they're like, wow, why haven't I been doing this for years?
mm,
And it becomes almost in some ways like a clear pathway for them to success. And for the other people, the ones that I think we're more talking about, they're the people that can come to me, and they're drawn to me because of my experience and what I've learned and my success, and they want that for themselves. And the
mm,
hard part is, I have to tell them, this isn't about exactly what I did. you know my exact experience isn't going to help you. What's going to help you is me sharing the tools that I picked up along the way, and then you have to start applying them in your life and find that success for yourself. Because like you said, it is great to be motivated by seeing other people's
mm,
success. Like, I think that is awesome. And learning from people's mistakes is also really awesome. But it's not until you actually start experiencing yourself that you actually start to learn what you need to be doing, and,
mm,
and what you need to do to be successful. And the key thing, it's not just about failing yourself and learning from your failures. When you rely on another person's success for inspiration, that only lasts for so long.
mm,
When you actually make changes for yourself and you start to experience success, that is a huge driving
mm,
factor in wanting to
mm,
do more and to keep going. I think the mindset that a person who wants to make change has to kind of get themselves into is a willingness to create something new.
mm,
I've been talking actually with a lot of clients about this lately, because I have several people I'm working with who are headed into that maintenance place.
mm,
And when they first started, they're very open about this. Their thought was, I will eat a certain way
mm,
until I get to a certain weight, and then I can go back to living my life the way I lived it before.
mm,
And I have to have that discussion about, well, the life you lived before got you where you were before.
mm,
So let's look at this slate as blank. Let's
mm,
look at what you're doing now as building the future that you want to live. And we go through, what does that world look like? How do you interact with it? What are the things you want to accomplish? And then what are the actions? And that's the biggest thing I think working with a coach helps with, because I think every person knows that they want to lose weight and why they want to lose weight. And all of those things are there inside of their heads. And sometimes they need help bringing that out so they can kind of understand their why better, but also helping them turn that why into tangible goals, and then turning those tangible goals into actionable plans, turning it into the habits that they need to build to support this life that they want to live, turning it into something that isn't just about knowing where you want to get to, but how you're going to get there. And that, I think, can be the hard part, because especially when it comes to keto, if you were to Google how to do keto, you would get a million answers and a million different people telling you a million different ways to do it. And it's true, there are many different ways to approach a ketogenic diet, because in the end, it's just about a metabolic state. So it's about finding for yourself what is the way that not only allows you to gain some success, but also feel sustainable and livable, and something that isn't just about a temporary change, but is about actually doing something with purpose and with direction. And I think the mindset needed is being open to learning, being open to being honest with yourself. Like I just can't stress enough, like, how important that core honesty with yourself is, because when you continue to tell yourself falsehoods, like, be honest about your fears, like, be honest that you're worried that it's not going to work. I think that's important. Like, I think it's important when I talk to a client, when I talk to them about, like, what are the things that you're worried about? Like, what are the things that scare you? Like, when they say, well, I'm just worried about falling off track, it's like, well, why are you worried about falling off track? And then you get into, well, that's been the pattern of behavior in my life. I'm successful for a little while and then I fail. Okay, so let's talk about some times that you failed. Like, what do you think brought you to that place? Like, what are they? And sometimes you can almost narrow it down to, like, an individual experience that kind of sets them off on one of those tangents. So then we can say, okay, so what's going to happen when these feelings come up again? I always say to people, plan for the worst case scenario when you're in the best place. When you're feeling, and we often want to cruise, we often want to go on cruise control. When we're feeling good, when your food is on point and your exercise is on point and your mindset feels great, you don't want to do any more of that work, because it's like, things are working. Like, this makes sense. All these pieces are clicking. And that's when I say, okay, so what's going to happen the next time you're challenged? Like, when you're starting to feel, when that depression comes back, or when those feelings of, I can't do this, or the motivation fades, what are the actual tangible things that you're going to do when that starts to happen? And how do we recognize that before those feelings reach, like, from a 0 to a 10? How do we recognize those feelings before they get to a 10? How do we address it when it's at a 2 or a 3? Let's course correct instead of having to, find our way back to a path that we can't see anymore. And working on that, honestly, even when things feel good, I think is really one of the keys that helps you handle it when things don't go so great. And I think you're less likely to see things not go so great, because you're building, again, it goes back to the idea of mindfulness, being mindful of everything that you're doing, understanding that even when you're making the proper food choices, you still say to yourself, why am I eating this? Okay, I'm eating this because of X, Y, and Z. Why am I going to the gym today? It's not just because this is what a lot of people are like, I go to the gym because that's what I do. And it's like, well, no, you go with purpose, understand that purpose. So on those days where you don't really feel that motivated to do it, you can be like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to do this because of this purpose. This is the reason why I continue to do these things. And it's being open to allow yourself to create that path for yourself. And like you said, learn from other people's mistakes. I can say to someone, we're headed towards the holiday season. And so I'm talking with a lot of people about how they want to approach Thanksgiving and how they want to approach Christmas and how they want to approach Hanukkah. And I always love to say, throughout my, I've been keto now for over almost 5 years. I have approached Thanksgiving 4 different ways. I had the year where my first year was, I just discovered keto. So it was like, let's create every keto Thanksgiving recipe there is out there and bring those with me to my family. And the next year I was working with a coach, and I actually just started with him a few weeks before Thanksgiving, which he was like, are you sure you really want to start tracking macros really tightly a few weeks before Thanksgiving? I'm like, let's do it. So that year I brought my food in little containers and everything was weighed out. And I think at that point I was eating 15 grams total carbs a day. So Thanksgiving is a carb heavy holiday. So there I was with like a small portion of cauliflower and a small portion of asparagus and my proteins. Um,
Man.
and it can be different every year depending on your goals. And I also remind people that a lot of times you're going on these journeys because you want to have more
Mm,
holidays. So if this holiday you need to keep things tight and track things and keep things in line to help yourself
mm,
actually handle
mm,
those challenges, know that you might handle it differently next year. Know
mm.
that you might handle it differently in 5 years, but you're earning those holidays that are still to come by doing this work. So don't don't always we get very insular sometimes and we think that because we're going to miss one experience one
Mm.
time or we're going to experience it differently than we used to, that somehow we're not living the right, we're not living a good life or something. I hate the phrase I got to live. People use that all the time to excuse poor food behavior. I got to live. I yeah, I went off plan and I put on
Mm.
a ton of weight this week, but I got to live.
Mm.
And it's like, well, if you got to live, why are you doing things that might make you not live?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but understanding that there's a bigger picture to it,
Mm.
like it really is about seeing your journey as lifelong,
Mm.
not just as one finish line, not just as one moment, not just as one choice, but as building a life that's going to keep you in this place where you feel healthy, you're healthy for the people around you, and you're able to contribute to the world in the way that you want to.
Man, it's just people that think that it's impossible with what you've done. I mean, losing 300 pounds twice. That tells you, that gives a lot of people relief, a lot of people hope. Uh, I can certainly agree that, when I struggle in an area, my first go to is just look for somebody that, had overcome and had succeeded
Mm-hmm.
in that area, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think, your story and your podcast also is one of the key uh, websites that I think would be able to, these people that struggles with their weight can be able to relate and find relief. I think they also have that desire, right? You talked about not having the right mindset the first weight loss, and the
Mm-hmm.
second go around you found that desire, that burning desire that you want to change. um, you talked about throwing uh, the processed food, the box processed foods away, everything, starting
Mm-hmm.
cold turkey. um, you talked about building habits and building momentum and building a sustainable lifestyle around that. Sometimes it takes just one habit that you can break,
Mm-hmm.
that you could build on uh, in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I want to ask you, maybe one of your clients talked to you about this. Do you allow yourself sometimes to, we call them cheat meals
Mm-hmm.
or what? Do you allow yourself to have some carbs, or how do you talk to your clients about those type of stuff?
So one is I don't use the language cheat or treat
Mm.
because I think one, we're taught as children that cheating gets you nowhere. Cheating doesn't get you to actually learn the knowledge you need to learn. So why now is cheating a good thing? It's there's another coach that I'm friends with, Samantha Souza. She uses the phrase planned deviation, and I love it,
Mm.
because I think the idea, the biggest thing, and so I do, and I talk to my clients about this, and I actually had a client this week, go through one of these experiences where you can eat quote unquote off plan, but you need to be completely conscious of the choice that you're making. Is it a conscious choice, or
Mm.
is it a situational response? I talk with them and with myself about this idea of, is this a worth it food
Mm.
experience? The example that I'm known to give for myself that I love, because now I feel like people ask me about this all the time when they go there is a cookie at Disneyland called the Matterhorn macaroon, that it is only sold at Disneyland in
Mm.
Anaheim, California, at one bakery in the park. It's only available in
Mm.
one location. And to me, it is the perfect cookie that has ever existed on the planet.
Mm.
So I know if I go to Disneyland, I'm going to have a Matterhorn macaroon,
Mm.
because the experience of sitting with my family in front of the castle, watching the fireworks or a parade or whatever, or just people watching and having that cookie is a worth it experience to me.
Mm.
I can only do it there. I can't do it anywhere else. And so I plan for that to happen. And so then if I see the scale up the next day because I'm holding some water from eating those carbs, I can't get mad and I can't be upset. because I made that choice the day before. I think when you make these choices with intentionality, and you think about the potential consequences, that it becomes easier to stay on track
Mm,
with food. Um, I, there's so much to say about this, because I think also it's okay for people then to, when they're thinking about those potential consequences, to realize, what, where I am mentally today, if I partake, I go away for this weekend and I don't track and I just eat whatever I want, and I come back from that weekend and I see a 5 pound gain on the scale, that is going to devastate me. So maybe I shouldn't do that. Be
mm,
conscious of what you're doing, make a plan, put some rules in place, and don't even. And this is one of the things, I go back and forth with one of my clients about this, because he's like, well, I'm not always planning my food out 7 days in advance. He goes, so if I want to plan, if I end up having a night where we just decide we're going somewhere with the family, and I decide I want to have an ice cream cone with my kids, will I ever be able to do that? And I'm like, it doesn't mean that you're not planning, though. It doesn't mean that you're not being conscious of that choice if you're deciding to have an ice cream cone with your kids. It means that in that moment, because it doesn't take long, it's not about sitting down and writing a book.
mm,
It's in that moment saying, okay, if I have this ice cream, I know that that means tomorrow I might have some sugar cravings and I might feel a little bit bloated. So I need to be okay with that. And so then when it's the next day or the day after, because I actually find with a lot of people, the sugar cravings come 2 to 3 days after. Um, you know where it's coming from.
mm,
So then you're not just in that place of, oh crap, now my body just wants more sugar, I should give it more sugar. Like, no, it's, you're conscious of, well, I had ice cream 2 days ago, so I know where this is coming from.
mm,
So yeah, today might be a little bit rough, but I'm going to get through it and I'm okay with that. And then the next time you're faced with one of those opportunities, think back on that experience you
mm.
had where you had cravings a couple days later, and you're like, okay, is going through that worth it again? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Is that okay for you? The other discussion that I have is, because like a person can very clearly define, like for me, in a lot of ways, a worth it moment involves something that is, handmade, or you can only get it in one
Mm,
location, or it's a part of an experience. Like I remember talking with my coach when we were discussing, this is before the pandemic, you can tell that by this discussion, but one of my goals in 2020 was I wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to travel. And I said to him, because he was talking about, he's like, oh, and you can have this there and this there, but talking like keto food. And I said, if I am in Paris, I am probably going to get a croissant or a French pastry from a bakery and see the Eiffel Tower
mm,
and enjoy that pastry. And obviously, with when COVID hit and all that happened, those plans changed. But it was that idea of that experience is something that I can't. It's not about buying croissants at the supermarket and eating them at home alone. You know, it's not about buying Reese's peanut butter cups that are available at every gas station across the country. It's about determining whether an experience would be worth it for me, because there would be consequences, there would be challenges. And what I find for myself now is then that doesn't lead to continued binge behavior, because I stay conscious and I stay aware of why I'm making the choice that I'm making. And I also don't make those choices all the time.
mm,
You know, the idea of defining a worth it moment for some people, then they think, okay, so for me, holidays are worth it days where I don't have to stay keto. Well, right now, especially here in the United States, there's a holiday almost every day. You could celebrate something every day. So it's
Very
about
true.
what is the bigger picture of your worth it? Like, what are your goals right now? I've got one client who was very close to that point of working on maintenance, and she's had a couple situations where she's making choices like that and coming back to me afterwards and saying, I did this, but it was worth it. And I'm like, every time we talk live, you tell me that your goal is to hit your weight loss goal and start working on these gym goals. But then you keep making these food choices that are holding you back from getting there. So are they worth it experiences or not? It's putting everything in context and deciding to make those decisions. And I think nitty gritty, when a person decides to have a planned deviation, put some rules in place.
Mm,
You know, what is that going to look like? Does the kitchen close right after? You're back, getting it, just laying it out for yourself. Okay, I normally stop eating at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to have this treat at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, the kitchen is closed. The next day, I'm back on track. And
mm,
please, if you take one thing from this discussion today, if you do, whether it's a planned deviation or you go off your program and you just make bad choices and you have a rough day or a rough weekend, whatever you do, don't punish yourself nutritionally after. Get back on the plan that you're following. don't reactionary fast. Don't say, oh, I screwed up and ate pizza yesterday, I need to fast for 72 hours to get it out of my system. Like that just starts a whole nother cycle of bad, unhealthy behavior when it comes to food. Yes, you may hold some bloat for a couple days, but realistically, you're probably not eating enough food to gain actual weight.
Yeah.
You're just having some extra. Your body needs the water to process the carbs. As soon as it realizes you're not taking more carbs in, it's going to start dropping that water again. Get back to your nutrition plan as it's laid out and treat your body properly. Don't punish yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Because remember, in the end, even if it is a choice that you made that you didn't plan for, you made the choice. You took that action. No one shoved the piece of cake into your face. No one picked up the ice cream spoon and force fed it to you. Like, yes, we're influenced by carb cravings and all of
Mm-hmm.
those things and hormonal issues, but at the end of the day, give yourself some grace and say, okay, I did that. How do I want to handle that next time?
Mm.
Learn something from the experience. I think if you learn from those experiences that they're not failures, they're just lessons along the way. And realize again, because let's be honest, if Thanksgiving and Christmas were the big problem for people when it came to food, we wouldn't have the obesity problem that we have in our country, because it would just be 2 days of food. The idea is the fact that we turn it into a holiday season that lasts 70 days, and it turns into a 70-day buffet for people. Like,
Yeah.
and it's the 363 other days of the year that are the challenges. Like, understand that having one day that doesn't go quite the
Mm.
way that you planned it doesn't mean that you failed, doesn't mean that you're broken,
Mm.
it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that you had that day. That day happened. You can't change it. You can't take it back. All you can do is look at what you're doing going forward. What do I need to do now to keep moving towards my goals? What do I need to do now to keep staying on track? And again, sometimes people hear that phrase, give yourself some grace, and they think that means excuse behavior. And I don't think that's what it is. I think it means giving yourself the proper talking to that you need to, and then saying, okay, but I'm going to treat myself well today, and I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm
Mm.
going to eat the food that I need to be eating, and I'm going to keep doing what I know I need to be doing. And I'm not going to beat myself up, and I'm not going to punish myself, and because I'm a human being, and human beings, we're all fallible at different points. And I think sometimes, and this is another hard part of this, is I think sometimes we beat ourselves up after we make those choices or have those cheat meals or whatever
Yes.
it is, because we want to continue that behavior. And if we start saying, I'm a bad person, I do bad things, then it's like, well, if I'm a bad person, if I screwed up, why don't I screw up again? Like, oh, how many people have been in that
Mm.
place of you make that bad choice on Friday night, and
Mm.
then it's like, well,
Yep.
I've already ruined the weekend.
Yep.
I've already ruined, this week's a fail.
Yep.
I'll start again next week. We
Yep.
want to excuse the behavior. We want to enable the behavior.
Yep.
It's the same thing when I've done it myself, when I've gone off track unplanned, and I talk to friends about it after, and they say, well, why didn't you talk to me before you made that
Mm.
choice? And my response is always, because you would have stopped me from making that choice. Like, be honest with yourself. You don't want to reach out to someone and get them to help you to stop it, because you don't want it to stop in that moment. And you have to be
Mm.
honest about that and try to understand where that's coming from, and how do you plan for that in the future, and what are the safeguards you set up. So saying to yourself, okay, I start to have those feelings again, I'm going to reach out to my accountability partners. I'm going to reach
Mm.
out to those people that support me, and so on and so forth. I could ramble about that for hours, I'm
Wow.
sure.
I know you talked about just having, being accountable with yourself and just being conscious with what you're eating and what the
Mm-hmm.
consequences would be. I know one craving leads to, binging,
Mm-hmm.
feeling guilt, and then now feeling bad, and
Mm-hmm.
now you want to punish yourself with more food and with more guilt, right? That just
Mm-hmm.
goes on, and next thing you know, you're just in this hole that you dug yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
Man, there's a lot here, guys. I hope you guys
Mm-hmm.
are taking notes. There's a lot of great nuggets here from Coach Mike, and man, there's been I want to be respectful of your time, and
Mm-hmm.
I urge everyone here that's listening to go back and re-listen to this and really just listen to the words, listen to how Mike has was able to get out of that situation he was in,
Mm-hmm.
and how he used his experience to help his second weight loss journey and fueled his journey and gave him this burning desire to be better and be better himself, and now he has this wealth of knowledge from both experiences to just uh help others out there that are in the same situation, that's wanting to get out, that's wanting to um give themselves another chance at life. And man, there's a lot here that I wanna
Mm-hmm.
I could talk to you all day, all night, Coach Mike, and I want my listeners to be able to find you. Where can they find you?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, like, as you mentioned earlier, I'm known as Gormy Goes Keto. You can find me on Instagram at Gormy Goes Keto and on Twitter at Gormy Goes Keto. You can find my podcast, The Fat Guy Forum, which on that podcast, I share the journeys of men that
Mm.
struggle with weight issues. Some are just beginning their journeys, some are years into their journeys. But it's always something unique. And it's not just a keto podcast. It's about men that use all different kinds of tools or aren't using any tools and are just, doing what they're doing with their lives. Um, if you are interested in talking to me from a coaching perspective, you can go to theketoroad.com. On there is my coaching page where I work with people. I actually, I will do programs that have actual kind of like structured ketogenic diets for people. I also work with people on accountability coaching where you have a food plan in place for yourself that you're following and you're just having trouble setting up your goals and sticking to it. And you want to still use that food plan, but you're looking for someone to help. I offer that service as well. I've also, for the past year, been writing biweekly blogs on that site where I come into these topics from mindset to food to coaching advice and things along those lines. So ketoroad.com is probably the one-stop shop to look into what's going on with me there as well.
We'll link it into the description below, guys. So get on that. Before we end it, I'd like to do some fun Q&A.
Sure.
Awesome. So first question is, if you would go on a day trip, days on the road, what do you put in that snack box?
Well, this is gonna sound so coachy, but like, one, like, I don't think we need as many snacks as we like to think. Like, the idea that we're forced to eat on airplanes is just dumb to me. Like, it's 3 hours. You can go 3 hours without eating. But if I'm planning a long day trip where I know I'm going to need food, my ideal things are usually, I love pork and goods pork rinds. I think they're an easy, I think hard boiled eggs travel really well. I like to get a little fancy sometimes, and I'll make like a deviled egg filling with the yolks and put that in one plastic bag and put the whites in another bag and then assemble them at different points. Snip the corner off the bag and you get a piping bag. Honestly, for me, I'm a black coffee guy. Like, I love a good cold brew, so I would take along a cooler full of my favorite nitro cold brew in a can. I've got a couple different ones that I really like. I think those are the things for me. Those are the maybe I might throw in some moon cheese too.
Oh,
If
okay, awesome,
I want
awesome.
something cheesy there, but usually for me, like, I'm sticking, especially road trip snacks, I'm sticking with something protein based.
Awesome. List 5 must-have items in your grocery list.
5 must-have items on my grocery list.
Yeah.
Okay. Pasture-raised eggs. There was just something really different about pasture-raised eggs, like good eggs. Ground beef, because I think it's probably one of the most versatile kitchen ingredients there is out there. I'm a cheese guy, so I could probably just list the names of 5 cheeses, but I'll just say cheese because it's there. Good butter, and one more thing that my must-have grocery items. Some keto people aren't going to like this, but onion. I love onions. I don't eat a ton of onion because the carbs add up really fast, but to me, a little bit of onion adds more flavor than anything else. So that's what I'll say.
Awesome, Coach. Thank you, Coach. Your advocacy, your journey to me is super inspiring. Anyone that would follow your journey at Gormy Goes Keto in Instagram, I urge everyone listening here to check your IG out, your podcast, your website, your coaching as well. I will link it in the description below, where Coach Mike shares his journey, progress, and knowledge, guys. So thank you, Coach Mike. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your story, your journey, and talking to my listeners about how it took for you to be able to go over that hump. It's possible, guys. So get on that subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Coach Mike, and we'll talk more, okay? Coach,
Thanks, man. I appreciate
thank
it.
you, sir.
Have a good
Bye
one.
bye.